Dianne's background is research director and program director of the MAPP program at the Center of Positive Psychology at the Melbourne Graduate School of Education. And so that's a primary basis of our background and collaboration, and so we're going to be exploring some things about collaboration, but we'll also be looking at some issues related to the International Positive Psychology Association. But today, she's going to give us a little bit more of a background of some of the things that she does. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Dianne. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Kurt. Well, you're looking pretty good for something that's so thank you for making the time to be here, and it's nice to see you all. I've heard a lot about this institute, and I'm sure that there are many synergies across the Centre for Positive Psychology at the University of Melbourne and the work that's being done here. So I hope to be able to share some of the work that I've been doing, but also to share some of the work of the Centre and the general mission of the Centre at the University of Melbourne as well. So some of the work that I'm going to be focusing on is the Wuzzup app, and this Wuzzup app is really about trying to understand the well-being of young people, particularly in educational and school contexts, so that we can be more proactive about delivering interventions that are going to meet the needs of the young people. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but I hope to give you a broader overview than just that particular program. So the Centre for Positive Psychology at the University of Melbourne sort of came alive 2-3 years ago, but it was in the planning for a while, of course. And really the main mission of the centre is we have this positive S-cubed motto, which is about trying to understand positive students, positive schools and positive systems. So really we want to take a science-based perspective to understand students, teachers and staff and education systems. And so far we've had the pleasure of working with a number of schools, both in Victoria but beyond Victoria, and that includes both the government sector as well as the independent sector and the Catholic school sector, and we've worked with youth not-for-profit organisations. So we feel that through the work that we've done with these various organisations, we've had the opportunity and the privilege to be able to really understand these systems and in particular young people and what they're crying out for. For me specifically, the main area of research that I do has really stemmed from the work that I started with the REACH Foundation. The REACH Foundation is an organisation in Victoria, and I believe they have a branch here in New South Wales as well. And they aim to try and promote the health and well-being of young people, to give them a voice, to make them feel that they are worthy and that they can accept themselves and try and improve themselves at the same time. And they run a variety of different wellbeing programs. Some are community-based, some school-based, and in particular we were brought in to evaluate 2 of their programs, in particular the Heroes Day program. And this is like a whole on-stage performance that the REACH Foundation run. It's for about 500 students, typically 2 schools come in for year 9, sometimes year 10 level, and it's delivered at an external venue or one of the REACH Foundation venues. And it really does encourage young people to consider where they're at and to consider where they'd like to go, and to have a vehicle to voice what they need. And it's quite confronting in many ways, the approach that the REACH Foundation take. They ask hard questions and try and get to the essence of what really is disturbing. So looking at the disablers for young people, but also trying to understand the enablers of those who thrive. What are the qualities that really get them to be mobilised and more than just functional, but in a flourishing state? They also deliver secondary school workshops, so they go into schools and they might target a year level within a school, and they'll run a series of 90-minute workshops. So we were called in to evaluate these Heroes Days and the secondary school workshop programs, and we also set it up so that there were control groups within both of these groups. So typically, the methodology that I have led is to really take a multi-level approach to understanding well-being. It's my view that while self-report surveys, questionnaires, serve a purpose, and certainly if you're trying to get a good snapshot of how a young person or anyone is, it does provide some information. But I feel that it can be very limited, and particularly when you're talking about things like well-being, there are a number of sort of socially desirable responses that young people might be inclined to provide, rather than really getting to the heart of their true experiences. So it's that premise that led me to really think about using a number of different strategies to collect data. And so yes, we do use online psychological surveys, and it's quite a comprehensive battery. It takes young people about 30 minutes because we really try and focus on measuring well-being in a fairly comprehensive way. So looking at the hedonic qualities of well-being, so how happy and satisfied they are with their life, as well as looking at more of the eudaimonic qualities, so how engaged are they with what they do, and how much meaning do they find in their life. Those sorts of qualities. But we also have included biological or physiological markers as well. And so two in particular that we've used include salivary cortisol, so we're looking at stress levels, and we also include heart rate variability. And that gives us an indication of resilience levels and the young person's ability to adapt to environmental cues, and I'll talk a little bit more about that perhaps. And then behavioural indices, and in particular we use the experience sampling methodology, and that's what the Wuzzup was in the title. It's an experience sampling methodology. It's an app that we've developed in conjunction with young people, for young people. And so I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. And then we also collect a lot of qualitative data, so we run focus groups of 8 to 10 young people to really try and understand their experiences and their needs. So we often run focus groups prior to developing and delivering a program, and then also at the end to see how they've received the program and whether there needs to be different iterations of the program. So that gives you an idea of the approach that we take to try and understand well-being. And as I said, the outcome variables are quite diverse in terms of the full range of well-being. So we include mental illness, so stress, anxiety and depression, as well as well-being. And typically we take baseline measures, then immediately after the program's completed, and then 3 to 6 months afterwards, as a follow-up, we do these measures again. I should add that the online surveys, we typically have a couple of hundred participants doing that, but the other biological and behavioural and the qualitative, we usually have subsamples doing that, and that's largely because of the cost and resources that are typically involved with doing that. So this is just a really quick snapshot of what we found with the REACH Foundation, in that when we compared those programs, the school-based wellbeing programs and the Heroes Days, we found that overall those programs were more effective than controlled conditions at enhancing life meaning, engagement with life, life satisfaction. This was for the Heroes Days only, and actually we had a couple of different locations of Heroes Days, and only one location was significant, so not the whole lot, and positive affect and perseverance. So what this is indicating is that there is early signs that these types of programs can be effective in enhancing the full range of well-being that represent what Peterson and Sullivan sometimes refer to as the full life. So having pleasure or positive emotions, feeling engaged and having meaning. And we've shown that there are signs of improvements in those areas as a result of the programs that the Reach Foundation has been delivering. And through the qualitative data, what we found was these programs are typically delivered by what are called Reach Crew. And so these Reach Crew are about 5 years older than the actual participants. So if we're talking about year 9, year 10 students, Reach Crew tend to be about 18, 19 years of age. And they're the ones that have been trained to deliver a lot of the program, particularly the Heroes Days. And what we find when we interview the young people is that that part is so important to them. They feel that there's credibility from the facilitators of the program. They feel that the facilitators are able to share genuine and authentic stories that many of the young people can relate to. But what's inspiring for them is that often the young people have progressed beyond that particular issue. Not to say that they're perfect, that they've gotten to an optimal state of functioning, but they can see that there are strategies that young people are using to help them move forward beyond their crisis or issue or depression or anxiety or whatever is the problem. And so that's really important. So in terms of the special component of the REACH program, it tends to be the REACH crew, the young people. In these programs, 20% reported that they experienced some sort of aha or light bulb moment, that something resonated with them and got them to contemplate deeply. A really important part of these programs is to promote this self-awareness and really to understand that everyone has particular issues, everyone has strengths, should be valued in their own rights, and therefore this whole process of judging others, which is common among young people, doesn't serve an important function. And so that really has shone through. And essentially they found that the young people really enjoyed the REACH programs. They found that they would recommend it to their friends and family. So that's typically a good sign. So it's through this process that we started to refine the methodology. And in particular, what we found with the REACH participants was that there was impact at the biological level. So this is an example of the cortisol, and we assess daily cortisol slope. Typically, what we did was we wanted to understand a young person's general cortisol level, more as a dispositional thing rather than as a state situation where you've got a stressor and how did they react or not react to that stressor. It was more trying to understand it as a disposition. And typically what you do to assess that is we did it over one day, and we asked the young people to provide a saliva sample just in a tube. They just sucked on a cotton swab and then put it back in the tube. So that was first thing in the morning when they woke up, 30 minutes later, and then in the evening before they went to bed. Essentially, cortisol levels are at their highest when you wake up, and what happens over the course of the day is that it starts to decline. The more rapid the decline, that means the less stress that you have in your system, and the more you're able to adapt, the more resilient you are. And so we're looking for a steep decline of the slope. And so you can see here, compared to the control group, the schools workshop and the Heroes Day participants had a steeper decline. And this was immediately after the program. And In particular, the Heroes Day participants were able to retain that 3 to 6 months later. So that's, again, I don't want to read too much into these things, but it's an indication, particularly if you take it in conjunction with the self-report measures and the focus group sort of information, that there seems to be some positive effect of these programs. And, one would think, and that's why I feel it's really important to be measuring where possible at the biological or physiological level. I think if it is able to penetrate, if the benefits are able to penetrate into the deeper physiological level, then it's more likely that you'll have sustained effects. And so that's a real goal.
I just ask this question, is the baseline differences important? Is it not a bad thing that they started out higher, or is it just irrelevant?
No, I do think it's a relevant point. So in terms of statistical significance, there wasn't really a major difference at the beginning, but there was a trend in that the heroes groups were higher, and I think that does make a difference. And in fact, I think that's a finding that's pertinent throughout a lot of positive psychology and wellbeing literature, that people who have higher levels of wellbeing or more levels of stress tend to do better in programs. So there's, I think, more scope to be able to improve, less of a ceiling effect, and I think that's really noteworthy. And for those of you who are interested in knowing a little bit more, there's a paper that will be coming out about this in Journal of Happiness Studies if you did want to follow up. And so my more recent project that follows on from this is evaluating more specifically positive education. And I was invited to be part of the evaluation for the Geelong Grammar School Positive Education Program. And we partnered together and put in a bid and were successful in receiving an ARC linkage project. So this project that I'm describing has received funding from the ARC and the partners are Geelong Grammar School and a few neighbouring partner schools as well, public schools I should say. It's a 3-year longitudinal study, and it starts with the evaluation of Year 9 students, and I'll describe that in more detail in a second. But basically, we also included the cortisol and heart rate variability here, the psychological online surveys, and the Wuzzup app, and we used qualitative and quantitative methods. So, how many of you are familiar with the Geelong Grammar School Positive Education Program? Just a couple of you, not all of you. All right. So Geelong Grammar School is about 45 minutes from the city of Melbourne. It is a very exclusive school. It's a co-ed school. About 80% of the students are boarders at Geelong Grammar School. They have the main campus, which is Corio, which is 145 minutes from Melbourne, but they also have Timbertop, which is about 3 hours drive from Melbourne, and this is specifically for Year 9 students. And it's a very much immersion and adventure program, and it's out in the wilderness largely. And so what Geelong Grammar School have had the good fortune of is Marty Seligman and his team coming down around 2008 from memory, and delivering positive psychology and formulating it into positive education for Geelong Grammar School. Marty Seligman came down with his team, and they worked with school staff initially, and trained school staff, and then worked with the teachers to help them to integrate positive psychology into the curriculum wherever possible, both explicitly and implicitly into the curricula at Geelong Grammar School. And so now what they have is they've progressed quite considerably, because it started with delivering the PEN Resiliency Program to Year 7 students at Geelong Grammar School. And the PEN Resiliency Program is a resilience program. It's largely cognitive behaviour therapy based. And Geelong Grammar School progressed that to lengthen the positive psychology component and just created their own flavour to it. And so now they offer explicit positive education to Year 9 students at their Timbertop campus, which is the one that's 3 hours away specifically for Year 9 students, and also to Year 10 students at the Corio campus. And this is the model that they use. So they base it very much on Martin Seligman's work, the PERMA model. So, you know, looking at positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. But they've added a positive health component. They felt that health was really important. Things like sleep, physical activity, are really important to them, and that's reflected in their Timbertop program actually, which is an arduous physical program in many ways. So these are the topics that are covered in their Year 9 and Year 10 programs. The Year 9 program, they have an hour a week for the whole year, explicitly, of positive education. The Year 10 program, they have 90 minutes a week, again, year long and explicitly. And they've had to have discussions with staff in terms of developing these programs because room had to be made in the program to be able to deliver this. And so it meant that, that there was less maths, less science, less English. So it was really important that they actually evaluated the impact of including a program in their curriculum. And they were accountable, you know, to parents, to the students, to stakeholders. And really their whole philosophy is that they're aiming to have flourishing students, that academic accomplishment is not sufficient, and you know, they're of the view that well-being for its own sake should be valued. But of course, they also think that if you enhance well-being, that it should have, you know, a positive impact on their academic performance as well. And so, underpinning this is character strengths, and then, as I said, that PERMA model, including the positive health. But they very much take a systems approach to this, where it's learn it, live it, teach it, embed it. Basically, what all that is saying is that they're saying that every person in the school should learn about positive education, and they need to adopt it in their own personal lives in order to be able to teach it effectively, and then that helps to embed a whole culture that accepts and speaks the language of positive psychology and positive education. And I know people will have a range of different opinions about schools like Geelong Grammar School, and you know, how lucky they are to have all the affluence and resources that are available to be able to deliver this. And before I took on this role, I questioned myself, you know, what are we going to achieve from doing this, and understanding how positive education impacts these students. And what's really important from my perspective is that I think the infrastructure is so critical to the success of any program. There needs to be champions. There needs to be like the sandwich approach, where the people who are receiving the program need to be committed and willing participants, but also that management need to also be participating and providing the resources to give this program every opportunity to succeed. And I think certainly from being involved with Geelong Grammar School as an independent researcher, I get that sense that if positive education doesn't work in this environment, I really don't know where it's going to work, because there are just the support factors there are at the highest possible level. So what does that mean? For me, it meant that there was an opportunity to really understand what are the active ingredients of positive education, and can we somehow bring those out and see if we can transfer those active ingredients in consultation with other public schools to create a more condensed version that's going to be feasibly delivered in public schools. We should be taking advantage of these opportunities to leverage the knowledge and see how we can apply it more widely. So I've just taken a very small first step in being able to do that. And really, this is the project, the ARC project, and you can see that initially it was about evaluating, following the Year 9 students, starting off at the timber top experience. And so we measured baseline wellbeing and physiological indicators and behavioural indicators and into Year 10. And then what's happening at the moment is that we have been working with a couple of the public schools and the teachers from the public schools have been consulted, as have the students, about these are what we found to be the most active ingredients from the Geelong Grammar School program. Do you think that would work for you? Do you think the needs that you experience on a day-to-day basis match what we're planning to include in the program? And then after some consultation, the teachers were trained by Geelong Grammar School staff, again voluntarily by them. The teachers from these various schools were trained on how to deliver it, and it's being rolled out at the moment. So just to give you a few of the results starting from the Year 9 students, what we assessed using online surveys are students' wellbeing and mental health, and there were a number of measures. The battery, as I said earlier, was 30 minutes long, and what we actually found was all these variables here significantly improved as a result of the Year 9 timber top experience. Now let me clarify that a little bit. So in the Year 9 timber top experience, positive education is one component of it. They are removed from their everyday circumstances. They're up in the natural sort of green environment. They share like huts or cabins. There are about, I think, 12 students in each cabin. They're meant to be fairly self-sufficient, so they chop their own wood. They help with cooking and preparing meals, and they are involved in arduous physical activity program. So they train the students to do runs, so cross-country running in particular. And so they start just on a couple of kilometres, but I think by the end the goal is for them all to have run 31 kilometres through cross-country, through bush. And they also have solo experiences where they spend a night or two alone in a tent out in the wilderness to reflect. At Timbertop there are no electronic devices permitted, and they don't really communicate with parents. After each term, I believe they can spend a bit of time back at home, but generally it's quite an experience. So you need to keep that whole perspective into account. It's not just positive education, it's that whole combined experience. But it's incredibly powerful. The results that we got, so many significant results. But I want to also tell you that we found with some variables there were no significant differences, so no change. Often there was a trend in the positive direction for these, but didn't reach statistical significance, and two actually decreased. But that might be the case, that they actually did decrease, but the probability out of all those variables of getting some declines, it makes sense that you've got to get something. And this is just to give you a snapshot of some of the significant findings. And so here we're focusing on wellbeing, so mental wellbeing and then satisfaction with life. So you can see the control participants over the year. So this is at the beginning of the year compared to at the end of the year. You can see the means there, so they're not massive, differences, but they're statistically significant differences. And what we find is they start off fairly similar at baseline, and the Geelong Grammar School students improve in terms of their wellbeing and satisfaction with life. And I think what's interesting, although I don't want to read too much into it, but having seen a lot of the results from schools, I see this general trend that secondary school students over the course of the year really tend to decline actually in terms of their well-being and mental health. So the fact that there's a program out there that increases their well-being, it not only stops it from declining but actually puts it in a positive direction can be helpful. Yes,
I was going to comment, I know that because you're increasing self-awareness, we've had some situations where we realize that pre-test, post-test are actually measuring different things post-test. And in one study, just informally, we had a retrospective pre-test where we asked people how were they at the beginning of the year, and that was quite different than the actual pre-test. And so you can well identify problems, issues that kids have that they weren't particularly aware of. And so that may, and I particularly with learning for later life and things like that might apply to that. The other thing I was curious about, could you tell us a little bit more about your control groups? Are they actually a random assignment control group? Are they ad hoc?
So the control group, it's a very difficult one with the control group because Geelong Grammar School, there were a number of ethical considerations as well and logistics. So because Geelong Grammar School believes so strongly in the potential positive impact of their programs, they didn't want half their students to have the program and half not to have their program. And I'm sure parents wouldn't want that either after the fees that they're paying, But so what we did was we invited young people from the community to actually who matched the socio-demographics of Geelong Grammar School to be participants. Plus we also approached some schools, and there were a variety of schools in terms of, one was a co-ed school, but another one was an all-boys school that was a boarding school, one was sort of semi-rural. So in combination we tried to match the qualities of Geelong Grammar School, but really, they're really like a quasi-matched group, but we tried as closely as possible, same age, SES.
And how about with the stuff that you did with the REACH program?
The REACH program, the control group was half and half, so it was actual from the school, half did it, half didn't.
So it was random assignment? Okay.
Well, classroom random, not individual random. Yeah.
Okay.
And just to give you a look at the opposite end, so the depression and anxiety, so the opposite was found in a favourable way in that started off fairly similar, but the Geelong Grammar School had declines in depression and anxiety for the Year 9 students. Now, what I find the most fascinating is the experience sampling methodology. And what we do is we have provided students with iPod touch devices where the program, the Wuzzup program is loaded on there. We randomly beep the students 4 times a day. And we ask the students at these times to report on their mood. So it's just a sliding scale from unpleasant to pleasant, what's been happening throughout the day, and their responses to daily events. So strategies that they're using in response to what they're saying is happening to them since they were last beeped. And I'll give you a bit more information. So this screenshots of the Wuzzup app, and so they're asked to indicate whether something nice has happened or unpleasant has happened. Then they're all drop-down menus. So they really don't have to type very much, and so they indicate whether it was a work-related issue or something to do with friends, or was it in school, or something physically to do with their health, etc. So general categories. And then this is the how did you react to that particular event. So there are positive and negative and in between sort of coping strategies. Now the whole point of this in particular is that because the positive education programs include so many components to them and they're taught a variety of different strategies, we actually want to know whether they're using those strategies or not. It's all very well to say that they've been exposed to a positive education program, but have they been able to embed what they've learned into that program in their everyday life to help them function? And this is what we were trying to get at with this. So we had some general coping strategies from the coping literature, but we also identified some very specific strategies that are being taught in the positive education program at Geelong Grammar School, and then some not helpful sort of strategies as well. And then we asked them, how did you feel that it went, that particular coping strategy? Did you find that it worked? And we also asked, where did you learn that strategy from? Because again, we can't just assume that they've learnt it from Geelong Grammar School POS-Ed program. They might have learnt it from their grandmother or their friend. So we wanted to tap into that. So with this experience sampling methodology, we did it every term, so at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, in term 2 and 3 as well. I said earlier it was a sub-sample, so this is a fairly small sample. It started off with 50, ended up with 44. But I feel we can get really rich data from this information. And these are different strategies at the bottom there. And what we find is, you can see the different colours. They represent term 1, term 2, term 3 and term 4. And what this graph is about is the use of positive strategies with the Timber Top students that were triggered specifically by the Geelong Grammar School Positive Education Program. So they've reported that they learnt these from the Geelong Grammar School program. One thing to note from this is that they're firstly using more positive strategies over the course of the year, and especially in terms 3 and 4, which are the yellow and the red charts. And so they're really learning. So all these ones in the middle, they didn't use at term 1. They've only started using them in term 3 and 4 predominantly. So they're things like asking for help, focusing on goals, expressing gratitude, using one of their character strengths, trying to think positively about a situation, and using the skill of real-time resilience, savouring the moment, etc. So I think that's really enlightening. This other graph is just a case study. So this isn't meant to be representing what every young person has experienced, but gives you an indication of the sorts of richness of information that can be gained. So what we have here in particular is we've got term 1 and what we're looking at is negative strategies to life events. So we're looking at the use of their strategies. So in term 1, if you have a look at the first 2 rows, positive strategies and negative strategies. They're using a lot of negative strategies in response to life events. What's interesting is that when we look at term 4, after they've had quite a bit of positive education program, you can see that it's shifted a little bit, at least for this person, and that they're using many more positive strategies compared to negative strategies. And to the various life events. So there's been a bit of a shift, and I mean that's the ideal, that's what we'd like to be able to see. And I think by having experience sampling methodology, you can get this level of richness.
That's a really cool graph.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, and I haven't gone into the detail. You can see the domains too, in terms of the types of issues that they experience, and then where the shifts are. So you can imagine that if you could collect that for a whole range of individuals, that would be just so enlightening in terms of trying to create an intervention and a strategy. And so really the key messages, now I should add that the data that I've presented is predominantly from the Year 9 positive education evaluation, which had the most striking effects. We are just about to release a report for the Year 10 explicit positive education program, and the results are not as striking. There are some positive outcomes, but not to the extent of the Year 9 program. And really I'll mention a few reasons why I think that's the case. But generally speaking, the trends are all there, even for Year 10. And so I think positive education does help to prevent or minimise the decline that naturally occurs in wellbeing over the course of secondary school and certainly over the course of the year. And I think that positive education programs do have the potential to enable young people to embed what they're learning in their everyday activities. We've seen signs of that occurring already. And I think the reason for that is because they get it. Positive education takes on a positive asset-based focus that engages young people rather than constantly worrying about issues and problems. You're still addressing the issues and problems, but you're just taking a strengths-based lens to say, okay, what resources and capacities are there for you to be able to get through these various situations that you experience, positive or negative. But it's really important that the beneficial outcomes, I think they're more striking when students can see real-world relevance. Particularly at Year 10, they were saying that the teachers didn't give enough examples that they could relate to, and so they didn't connect with it as much at Year 10. They found that because they had so many challenges at Timber Top at Year 9, they could transfer a lot of that knowledge, and they were all experiencing a similar thing, the students, so they could share and learn and try these approaches together. And that was a little different when they went back to their normal school environment. It wasn't as obvious.
But the Year 10 kids had already had Year 9, so this is really a follow-up.
Yeah, that's right. And not all of them actually heard, because what happens is there's about 50% that have done Timber Top Year 9. So at Year 10, half of them had done Year 9 and half hadn't done Year 9. So there were two groups there.
Obviously not random assignment or
anything like that. No, that's right. But it was interesting because we were able to compare the difference as well.
Yeah. Because even maintaining a flat line for the kids that had already had lots of benefits would be a very positive
correct.
Relative to what happens in education research.
Yeah, exactly right. And a whole school approach is really critical. Again, it's the critical mass of the system that really helps. It's about students feeling that it is an authentic approach, that if it's being delivered to them, then why isn't everyone doing it? And so if they can see that even the principal, their teachers, the gardener, they're all involved in positive education, it gives authenticity and credibility to it. So that whole school approach is really important. Learning is embedded and ongoing. So we found with the Year 10 students, they're now in Year 11 actually, we did a booster session and they loved it. The school did a booster session. So it's not something that you just do, once or twice. It's got to continue throughout their whole education and subsequently into their life. And I think this is the key, and this is what perhaps differentiates, the Timber Top experience and the Corio experience, is combined with other health promoting activities. And I'm not saying that at Corio they do sport. Most schools are involved with, have opportunities for people to do sport, but just Timber Top was an exhilarating nature, physical, challenging experience, and I think it's difficult to replicate, to be honest. So So as I said, we're tailoring it to public schools at the moment. The other angle that we take is narratives. And because I mentioned academic performance, so we've been trying to see what the impact is on academic performance. Unfortunately, we have the skills and knowledge of Professor John Hatton, who is also a project team member of this, and he was pointing out how you can't just take someone's grade for English and maths at term 1 and compare it with term 4. If a student gets a B in term 1 and gets a B in term 4, statistically that would mean that there's no change, but there has been growth and learning that has occurred to maintain that mark. And so teachers will point out that there are a number of challenges with that. We've collected that data, but we've also tried to be a little innovative in trying to understand how young people are growing intellectually. And so what we've created is these opportunities for young people to write. And so we'll ask them things like, you've got the opportunity to receive funding to enhance the well-being of a community. What would you focus on? How would you do it? We're trying to get at their value base in terms of what does well-being mean to them? Is it economic prosperity? We're looking for, and so they have a similar, one's focused on quality of life and one we talk about general well-being and prosperity. And so we give those two questions at the beginning of the year and then at the end of the year. And we look for things we're looking for. We haven't analysed the data fully yet, but we're looking to see if they have a more positive approach, so they're able to use more positive emotions in their descriptions, whether they have a greater breadth of knowledge in terms of what well-being depicts, whether they can be more pro-social in their perspectives of looking after the well-being of a variety of different groups. Instead of or just identifying their particular group, can they expand social networks? And we're also going to be using a program to analyse the grammar, whether they've got a systematic sort of coherent approach. So there are academic sort of criteria that we're going to be assessing in there as well. But we're still in the midst of doing that. But it's just a different approach to understanding academics, to supplement academic grades. And the next phase we are applying for another ARC project to look at the sustainability of positive education. So they're now in year 11, we followed them in year 9, 10 and they're currently in year 11. We're looking to get funding to see if those people who have received positive education compared with those who haven't received positive education are able to transition from secondary school to their next life phase with more success in terms of not just the hard objective data, in terms of whether they get into university or are able to get employment that they're happy with, have satisfying relationships, but yeah, their character and attitude as well, and whether they can cope and they feel that transition is more manageable as a result of learning these positive education skills. So that's really important. We don't want positive education to just be this short-term thing and then it really has no positive impact into their life. So that's the next course of funding that we're looking to be able to explore. And just conscious of the time, so new directions certainly that I'm interested in going in is understanding adolescent time use. I mean, this has really opened up my eyes that you really need to understand the full complexity of what young people go through. And I'm wanting to develop this innovative and engaging app that measures what young people do without being too intrusive and too personal, but really still trying to understand over a week exactly what they do. And to have a look at some of the broader questions that are being asked in the community about young people. These questions about how much screen time is too much and is going to affect their well-being. What about green time? You know, because technology is so prominent now, are they missing out on seeing nature and green space and fresh air? Does it mean that it impacts on their social life? And also this notion of solitude. Sometimes solitude is seen as a negative thing because positive relationships are really important for well-being. But I don't know that young people, or anyone for that matter, has enough time to reflect, to process. When we think about gratitude, we need to stop and process what we're grateful for before we can express gratitude. And if we're too busy running from A to B to C, it doesn't give us space to do that. And so solitude time can be beneficial if it's voluntary and if it serves some value. And sleep, you know, again, electronics and technology can start to encroach on young people's sleep time. There have been studies on young people having electronic devices in their rooms, and therefore that is tempting to use it and starts to impact on their sleep time. But factors to consider as well is their motivation for doing X, Y and Z throughout the day. Choice, volition is so important. I know you guys are big on self-determination theory here, and I love it and try and embed that. And so, does choice matter? Enjoyment. What about competence, skill level? And for me, what would be really interesting about this sort of project is the constellation of activities is important. Often with these time use analyses, they'll say, okay, what's the impact of screen time on physical health, say sleep quality? And it's so limited that it doesn't take into account other factors. So I guess what I'm saying is there are all these guidelines and recommendations. Screen time, it's recommended for someone aged 13 to 17 that they don't spend any more than 2 hours of their leisure time on screen time, otherwise it's detrimental to their health. There are also guidelines in terms of physical activity, that 60 minutes per day is recommended for a young person. Now, if you are on the screen for 2.5 hours, yet you do 1.5 hours physical activity, yet during screen time you're socialising with people that you might not have been able to socialise, it may not be as detrimental. But if you are spending hours and not doing physical activity, not engaging socially, not able to function, you know, in terms of getting to school, doing the homework that you're meant to do, then that's got a negative impact. So for me, it's about the constellation of activities. It's about developing profiles of these various important factors and determining how that impacts on physical health, how that impacts on psychological health and academic performance. And I actually think what might impact on psychological health might be different, the profile might be different compared with academic performance. And already I've been speaking with a few researchers in this area, and it's interesting because they were sort of saying, sometimes to do really well academically, it involves you sitting down and being studious, not actually physical activity. I'm just going to quickly mention a couple of things that we're doing at the centre. The wellbeing profile for schools. So this is an online survey that we have put together that is looking at, it's gone through quite an extensive construct validity process of all the measures that we've used in some of the studies that I've described to come up with a number of important domains that schools can be part of this and go online, complete the survey, and then they get a profile of their students' results. The thing with this, I know that there might be some other programs like this already in existence, but they're not very strengths-based. They're not very well-being focused. They can tell you how much stress, depression, anxiety a young person has, but not really the full breadth of more the well-being side of things. And, you know, if you...
Those ones are probably sponsored by the pharmaceutical companies.
Possibly, I don't know about that, but yes. It's just we've had a limited understanding of mental health that's been very skewed towards, psychological and mental illness. And we know, particularly from the work of Corey Keyes, yes, that it's important for us to, diminish psychological ill health, but we need to also have a presence of well-being. And that if diminishing ill health alone is not sufficient. And that impacts public health to reinforce the well-being piece as well. And so you need to measure it. And that's what we're offering schools and offering profiles to schools. So if you want to know more about that, by all means, let me know. This is some of the work that we've been doing. Ruben Rust, who has just submitted his PhD, has been doing really exciting work in seeing the growth of positive education and positive psychology, I should say, in the different disciplines. This is sort of like bibliographic analyses here that's looked at all the publications in journals, and it has been published, it was published in 2013, so if you'd like to know more. But you can see the growth areas of positive psychology, and you can see that it's starting to get into clinical psych and psychiatry, into the business sector, and education is growing. And I don't know about you, Herb, but there's a real sense that we here in Australia are leading the way in terms of positive education. So I think if we work collectively, we can really make a positive impact in that space.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You know that graph just previously.
Yes.
Is there anything there about music?
I should put you in touch with TC Tan Chuan Chen, who has been doing work in the area of music and psychological well-being. So I think there's nothing specific about music, apart from sort of, it's more in the humanities, but it hasn't come out strongly here as a discipline, but it's growing. I know that at the University of Melbourne, they're really starting to see connections with positive psychology and music specifically. So I can give you that contact if you like. We've also done other sorts of analyses, like thematic analyses, where we're looking for positive traits. So Kelly Allen, a PhD student who has just had her PhD conferred, and we've got a paper in preparation looking at mission statements, vision and mission statements that schools are putting online. And I think we had about 308 secondary schools in Victoria, and they were analysed in terms of the words that were used, and we found that academic motivation was really a key in mission statements, but things like school belonging are really important, and that speaks to the point about social relationships being important. And we've done things like lexicon analyses. I haven't specifically been involved in this, but others from our team can certainly tell you more. But what they've done is they've developed a wellbeing lexicon library, and we've got the good fortune of having Peggy Kern, who was from University of Pennsylvania, working with Martin Seligman on a lot of these big picture data analyses. And so we've created a word list, and we were able to have a look at what the prominent words are that emerge from these mission statements from schools. So just understanding the messages that schools are putting forward in the public domain is interesting, to see whether we need to have conversations with them about other important factors. But it's great to see, the word whole, positive, happiness being included in there, that it's not just plastered by the academic side of things. So I think the message that schools want to portray, at least, is more of a holistic approach to the well-being of the young person. What actually takes place in schools might be different. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but these are just the mission statements. So we're exploring all those sorts of things.
In that word map, there's no academic achievement.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting that this is the message they're trying to put forward about the whole person. So it's
I mean, surely the mission statements have all say something about academic achievement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good to know. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Well, I can give you more details about the study and you can look into it further. Yeah. So essentially, on behalf of the centre, I'm saying that we're really invested in looking at this positive S-cube model. We have a long way to go in understanding systems, and our chair, Professor Lee Waters, is certainly looking at developing positive parenting programs, and a lot of the schools are now working towards that because they understand it's not enough to just deliver positive education to the school staff and to the students, but you really need to look at parents as well and having an impact on policy, education policy, health policy, in order to impact the mass. And so we're really aiming to do that over the next few years. And I suppose our strength is that we're really moving beyond just self-report surveys to include bibliometric analyses, the biophysiological data, the ESM methodology, looking at qualitative methods and lexicon analyses. So I hope I've given you a bit of an overview of some of the work that we've been doing. And thanks so much, you've been so attentive. But if you've got any questions, I'm not sure if you all have to rush or... Yes.
Yeah, congratulations, that was well done. And
Thank you.
it's good to see someone moving beyond self-report surveys, which have their obvious limitations.
They're challenging, you need money. That's the problem, you need money to move beyond self-report.
It was good to see that the PERMA framework used. Now that's in the explicit curriculum, what I call the explicit curriculum.
Yes, that's right.
Which is good.
Yes.
But also, if you consider an implicit curriculum where you have a teacher who may be teaching algebra and teaches nothing but algebra for that 50 minutes or whatever, they also can do wonderful things simply in their manner, in the implicitness of their style. They're not judgmental, they're positive. So, I mean, that should also be considered in a positive school.
And it is. At Geelong Grammar School, they're very much about, it happens on the sports field, it happens in every class. In English class, they're talking about reading a particular novel, they bring in strengths, so wherever they can do it. And that was very early on. They brought Martin Seligman out, and one or two members of his team were specifically helping teachers at Geelong Grammar School to think of creative ways of merging positive psychology in a more implicit way in everything that they did. So exactly what you're talking about. So we've been working on it for a long time.
Otherwise it's just a bolt-on.
Yeah, and that's that whole notion of the embedded. Remember I mentioned that the whole system, sort of live it, learn it, the embedded part is just so critical. Any opportunity for you to embed it, they do. They want the culture.
With those graphs you showed before, what kind of effect size are we looking at here?
Yeah, pretty weak effect sizes. So most of the positive psychology interventions and most interventions overall tend to be around 0.1 something, 0.2. So yeah, that's a strength here. We're not talking 0.4s, 0.5s, 0.6s.
Related question for the EMA study that you talked about. Just curious as to how you incentivise the students to actually do it, because that's always tough.
It is, and it is an ongoing struggle. So I think you've hit some, a really key issue. We offered incentives like if you completed the full set of things that we asked them to do, that they're in a draw to win, an iPad or those sorts of things. We also gave out some little $20 vouchers just to keep them going. But it is an issue, and we're finding actually as time goes on, so some of those experience sampling methodology participants, they started in year 9, they did it 4 times, so it happens for a week, 4 times. They're beat 4 times a day, so 28 times each week, they're randomly beat, 4 times a year. By the 3rd year, we were getting a lot of nothing really happened, when we were asking what. And so I think it is an issue keeping them engaged, and this is where I think we need to be even more creative and have some sort of gamification approach to these apps, not just you could win a prize. And a gamification that will engage them at a game level but also at an educational level.
I was intrigued. You touched on it. Geelong Grammar has resources to do Timberlake, and that's really what seems to make a difference.
Well, the largest difference, yeah.
Okay. And then you're talking about trying to transfer this to public schools that don't have those resources, and they aren't going to be able to do a Timberlake.
Timber top, yeah.
Or timber top,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. That's right, no they're not. But I mean, I suppose compared to the Year 10 program, compared to the timber top program, was not nearly as effective. But it was still quite effective in helping to stop the decline of negative experiences as you progress through secondary school. And so I think that is beneficial. But yes, that's the real test. And I think whatever the results show, it's going to be helpful, because what's happening at the moment is that many schools want to implement positive education. And if we find, albeit very limited sample that we have, it's not going to be conclusive, but if we find that there are absolutely no effects of incorporating it in the public schools because they don't have the adequate sort of support system, because they're not spending long enough for each lesson, that it's not effective, well, that's an important message to be sending out there, because many schools are investing, public schools that hardly have any money are doing their utmost to try and include it in their curriculum.
Yeah, we're even being trained by Geelong Grammar.
Yes.
Well, I guess one thing with this field is that positive interventions are characterized as a single thing, like a single kind of pill. And I know Seligman's approach is very different from, say, a mindfulness-based or an act-based approach. And when I saw, for example, you're finding that one of the things that improved was they were able to stop thinking and feeling negatively. An act approach or a mindfulness-based approach, you might see an increase in that. And then on the next page you said mindfulness wasn't influenced, and neither was pro-sociality. And so I was thinking, maybe to be pro-social, caring person, you have to be able to have both the positive and negative present. I guess, how do we move beyond this giant package approach? Everybody has their own positive psychology package. I mean, how do we discover what this is? I mean, I'm so glad you're doing this research. This really needs to be done. And how do we start to hone in on what's really working?
Yeah, and that's why I think asking key questions to the young people that tap into what you're saying. Negative experiences don't necessarily translate into negative emotions or dysfunctional. It's very helpful to experience that. It's just, and that's what I think the Timbertop students experienced a lot of at the beginning. They had doubts about whether they could achieve things, and it was working through that and seeing that they did transform to some extent was really
There's something about both Reach and Timbertop where you dramatically remove people from their environment. You put them into a real pressure cooker where they're forced to prove themselves, and it's like, and then when you go back to the school day-to-day stuff, I guess maybe you can't reach that elevation.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there is something about that. They need to be challenged. They need to be stopped and asked hard questions, and to really think about where it is that they're going and why they're going there, rather than just keep moving forward in an automated fashion. And sometimes that's hard. The tough questions that will tap into all sorts of emotions, but that's the life experience, so I totally agree.
Yes, there's, in New South Wales, Scots College does a similar thing. So in Year 9, their Year 9s will go to stay in Kangaroo Valley in a boot camp style thing, similar.
Yes.
It might be useful to possibly see if they've got anything there, some research. I don't know, there might be some stuff there.
Don't tell that. That's
What?
what we're doing.
Oh, well, yeah.
Never heard.
So anyway, I'm just saying that there is another school that's doing that sort of thing. So,
Yeah, and year 9 seems to be the year that many schools have selected as being a difficult year, and they do take them on a special sort of experience, especially private schools. Yeah, sorry, what?
The hormone years.
Yeah, the hormone year, but I think that's changing. I think it's coming sooner, but anyway.
Well, there's also outward bound.
Yes, outward bound.
That would be an interesting to try and look at them as a control group.
Yes,
Of
because
sorts.
of the adventure part. Absolutely, yeah.
I'm sure they would not feel that they don't have a positive education component to it to an extent, but clearly it's much more focused on the outdoor education
Yes.
part, and that would make an interesting control
Comparison.
group or comparison group.
Totally agree.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering about the correlation between those cortisol difference scores
Yeah.
and some of the self-report items that you had. Do you have that information off the top of your head, or?
Well, the correlations are only very moderate, so that they are in the vicinity of around 0.2, less than 0.3 generally.
Did the cortisol difference scores relate more strongly to some of those variables or others? What was cortisol psychologically related to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to go back and look at the data with respect to that, but if I can email you,
Sure.
yeah, and let you know.
I was just thinking it'd be interesting to look at it. We're going to do a study with kids that are about to drop out of school, and it would be interesting to see the change during the course of school, and if you can reduce the stress responses.
Yes,
So I wouldn't mind getting a copy of that paper.
Yeah, sure. That's interesting. So, dropping out, what age? Like in year 11?
11 to 15-year-olds, so young. We're getting them really young.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think trying to understand if, in fact, positive education can help stop some of that even early on. But I was talking about the transition year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even there is unfortunately the situation where students are in schools and they're not engaged. There's that absenteeism notion. Even though they might not have dropped out of school, they may as well have dropped out.
Although Geelong, they do have 100% control. They live on campus. They've got like 8 people working in the social emotional learning section. I mean, that's just staggering. It's like $1 million a year. You're right. If it doesn't work there, then we're really not doing something right.
Let's all thank